Hello, everyone, and I've got a special guest on the show today. Her name is Cindy Drummond. Welcome.
Thanks, Pauline. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, so glad that you're on. So, Cindy, please introduce yourself and what do you do?
Thank you. So my name, as you mentioned, is Cindy Drummond, and I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I'm best known for my story called Reflections from the Dating Pool. So I'm an author who lives in Calgary and also the host of a retreat called Women Only Weekend.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And a word that caught my attention in your book, dating, actually, the word dating. What inspired you to write this book?
So from when we first chatted, I mentioned to you that I always wanted to write a book. I didn't have a topic to write about until a few years ago when I had left the father of my children. I was living with somebody who truly I thought was the love of my life. And one morning, my dream was shattered when 7 police officers burst into our home and hauled him away in handcuffs.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, so pretty dark place.
Yeah.
I had to, that day, I had to make a decision. I left our home. I took my 2 children, my daughters, who were 16 and 13 at the time, and I sought refuge in my parents' basement in my mid 40s. So a pretty humbling experience, pretty hard experience, actually.
Mm-hmm. If we can go into a little bit, I think people would be quite curious as well. Were there any signs of the person that he was leading up to this event?
Yes, not the signs that you would expect me to answer, but there were things like all of a sudden he wasn't where I thought he would be. There was excuses. His phone now had a passcode on it, and I started feeling like there's something wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it, and I started second guessing myself. I was asking him questions. I was getting babe, you're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know why you're asking me this. And so you start questioning yourself, and you think maybe I am crazy. Maybe I'm just jealous. Maybe I'm losing it. So yes, there were signs, but I didn't know what that meant. And I ignored them because I wanted to believe him.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And only if you're comfortable in sharing, do you know, when they came in, what was it all about?
So when the police arrested him, and again, it was kind of chaos going on in my house, and when they first said to me, we are arresting him on charges of suspected voyeurism, I didn't even know what that meant.
Yes.
Voyeurism, the definition for voyeurism is basically when somebody without your permission has taken photos or video of you and perhaps shared it, maybe not shared it. But yes, that was what he was accused of, was videoing somebody without their permission.
Right. Okay. Is that quite a serious offense where you are as well?
It is. It's he went to jail.
Wow. That's quite a traumatic experience, especially with your two kids as well, with all of that. What happened next? Like after all the chaos, so you went to the basement of your parents. Yeah. Talk us through the life there.
So pretty quickly, and I can't tell you now how this came about because I was just living in kind of survival mode, but I knew my family was worried about me. My friends were worried about me. And so as I was trying to process this, there was also some anger. I now was part of this dirty story that I didn't want any part of. And so I quickly realized that I needed a distraction. And so I needed something that people would think about me in a positive way rather than a negative way, because I had nothing to do with what he had done, but I didn't want that attachment. And so I picked up the phone and I booked 65 spots at a resort not too far away from my home city, and planned this retreat for women to come and gather. And honestly, it was just something to keep my head from thinking, not from thinking about what was going on in the background with him. And so I guess that gave me something to look forward to. And what I didn't realize is that event, when it was all said and done, was this kind of life-changing opportunity for me and a number of people, because it propelled me to start a whole new chapter of my life.
Wow, that's incredibly inspiring. And even for you to come from that chaotic environment, to even have the idea of like starting this event, had you had experience before this in terms of starting events, or like, because I'm just trying to picture someone in this environment. If I was in my parents' basement, or if this event had happened to me, in terms of distraction, that's a pretty big like responsibility to take on, to plan an event, 65 people. What was going through your mind? Like, how did this all come about?
Maybe it was just sort of some divine intervention. I honestly don't know, because I have never planned an event like that before. I remember just kind of doing without thinking much about it. I was just reaching out to people and saying, hey, do you want to come speak at my event? And hey, I don't have a website, but do you want to come buy a ticket to this retreat that I'm hosting? And it just worked out. It's crazy that it worked out. But I think maybe it was my enthusiasm. I think maybe it was that people wanted to support me, just because, maybe some of them were feeling a little sorry for me. I don't know. But it's quite funny, because now when I think back, I didn't even have an agenda. 65 women showed up to this event, and I don't even think they really knew what they were signing up for.
So what was the purpose in order to attract people to come along to this event? Obviously it's could be some kind of networking things happening, but what was your sort of, you said there was no agenda, but in terms of the hook, like what were people doing there? What was happening at the event?
They had 12 speakers to choose sessions, and I think they were like sessions on, some were financial sessions and some were sessions. I think there was a Zumba class that first year, and others were, I think there was a wine tasting. So it was just a variety of sessions, which none of those really matter now, because it was just this opportunity where we gathered. But I will tell you that at the end of the Saturday sessions, we did a karaoke dance party. And when you looked around the room and saw these 65 women singing and dancing together, the only word I can describe it is magic. It was absolutely magical.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I've been to quite a lot of events in the past where I know it's quite euphoric when you can, have the unity and the energy of people within one space as well. Mm-hmm. So that event, how long did it go for? How many days?
It was just a Friday and a Saturday. Sunday, okay, we had breakfast, and then we returned home.
Right. So after the event, what happened in your life? Like, how did that become transformative for you?
I think in two ways. One is, there is this, you said euphoric, and then you come home and now all of a sudden I'm kind of depressed again, right? Like, I was looking forward to this. I had put all this time into this, and now I was in a position where I'm alone. My daughters are safe. I'm still living at my parents' house, who's now gone away for the winter, and I'm feeling super sad, and I'm feeling really isolated. But the other thing that came out of my event, I think, was this trust. And I think I realized that I needed to figure out how to trust again. And I needed something to encourage me to I didn't want to be alone the rest of my life. I'd be okay if I was, but I didn't want to spend every night on the couch watching TV. I knew that I wanted to start living again. And part of that included being in a relationship, and I didn't know how to go about that.
Mm. Give people an idea in terms of the in terms of when you spoke about trust. Trust takes time and lots of effort in order to build. In that relationship that you were previously in, how long were you guys together?
We were together for almost 7 years.
Wow, that's a long time. And yeah, and you can imagine the how being together for 7 years can then lead to broken trust, and how hard it could be for someone to reopen their heart again, particularly for something like that. Yeah. So talk us through that journey for you, because from that point onwards, what were the things that you needed to learn or to do in order to rebuild your own trust and, go on that next chapter?
I don't know if I knew what I needed to do. I just knew that I needed to start dating. And again, like I had never been on a dating app. I had never, you know, I didn't have any of that experience. So it's all pretty overwhelming. And, you reach out to a few friends and you start saying to people, like, do you know any nice people that I could date? And you get the same answer. Well, anyone that I know that's single, probably you're not interested in. So you realize pretty quickly that if you're going to make this work, you have to do the work. You're not going to just walk into the grocery store and bump into the right person. You might, but those fairy tales are few and far between. So it was coming up to the end of the year. It was the middle of December. And I said, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to have to put myself out there. And I went on to a dating service and had a date lined up. And I drove to that first date crying, bawling, tears streaming down my face as I'm driving to go meet this guy for coffee. And because I wasn't ready, I knew I wasn't ready, but I was also afraid that if I put it off, what if I never was ready?
Yeah, a real fear as well, because one of those things are like fear of just being alone for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
So did you pull it together before you got there?
Yeah.
How long was the drive, by the way? Like, is this a long drive or like a short drive?
Yeah, it was a pretty short drive. I pulled it together and there was no mascara running down my face or anything. So I pulled it together. And the funny thing is, you have all these expectations and all these fears. And this guy that walked in, he was just as nervous as I was, so I remember sort of thinking to myself, like, I was so worried about how I would show up, but really he was just as worried. He was showing up and nervous as well, right?
Mm-hmm. What was the dating service when you were going through that? Because now things might have changed quite a lot, but just give us an idea of like, what did that involve for you, or the process?
Again, I mentioned that I was naive. So I paid a matchmaking service thousands of dollars, expecting that would find me a higher quality person than if I was just to go on to one of the more common dating apps that they have now. So I naively thought that, they would have this roster of eligible bachelors and they would do criminal checks and matchmaking and line up my values with, but I don't really think that's how those services work. And I guess I don't really know if they're still in business, but I spent a lot of money, again, wanting to trust somebody else. And I felt like the lesson that I learned throughout this was that the only person that I can really learn how to trust is myself.
Yeah, very valuable lesson. So Was there like, I guess, is there a lot of consultation in terms of like what's your ideal profile and then like set you up and everything? Do you get to choose, or like, yeah, how does that work?
Yeah, it's all a marketing pitch, and I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Truthfully, yes, there was pages and pages of quizzes on personality style, but yet I don't really even know if any of that was ever used. And I guess it doesn't matter, but I just so wanted to believe that that's what I was paying for, is somebody to find me Prince
Mm,
Charming.
yeah, and you trusted in that process as well by forking out the money for it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go fast forward to the meeting again. So yeah, how did it meet your expectations or didn't meet your expectations from that get-go?
It he was a nice enough person. I think what the lesson that came out of that first date was, okay, that was probably the hardest date I will go on. So maybe, well, I'm not ready at this moment. Maybe if I set myself a challenge, maybe if I challenge myself to go on 50 dates over a course of a year, maybe then I will be able to find the love of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you were really willing to put in the work.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. And yeah, so then after, when you set the challenge, then what happened from there? How did you schedule it, or like, you know, how did this all come about?
So in my mind, I thought, okay, so there's this one dating service, and I'll just get on one app, and again, they'll just be like, the floodgates will open, and there'll just be all these men that want to take me out for dinner, and that's not how it works. I was on one app, and you get a little bit of attention, and I've got a few dates lined up, and I go on a couple of those dates, and then I'm like, okay, maybe I should get on another app, and then there's a few more dates, but it doesn't matter. I'm doing the work. I'm coming home from every date, and I'm journaling, and I'm writing little notes to myself, and I'm calling them words of wisdom. And so, for example, date number 6 never showed up. I went to a coffee shop, waited and waited, and there's people coming through, and this guy does not show up, or worse, maybe he showed up and didn't like what he saw and he left, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty humbling. So I come home and I write myself a little note, and I say, okay, words of wisdom: never stand somebody up, never let somebody feel how you felt today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very profound.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, were you tracking like after each one you were like, okay, we're like, did you have a tracker or something? Like, how do you know?
With tracking in the sense that I journaled,
Okay.
I'd write date number 7, another Dave, and so I would write, like, this is where Dave and I went, and this is what I learned, and this is what I'm going to take away from this experience. So yes, absolutely.
Okay. And along the 50, were there any successful that really took you on the journey?
Yes and no. There was a few guys that I had a second date with. There was a few guys that I had a third date with. There was a lot of guys that I kept meeting the same type of person, and I would come home and I would say, okay, like, I thought we had figured this out. We weren't going to date guys that had never been married, or never, and nothing wrong with that. But for myself, as a mother of children, I knew that I probably needed to date somebody that had their own children. And so, I was just trying to figure it out. But there was some good dates. There were some nice guys, for sure.
Yeah, because that's really interesting. You mentioned, like, I'm really curious. I mean, so I don't have children yet. However, very curious about that side of things. Like, how is the playing field different, or what are the challenges you have when you do have a family of your own and you are trying to find the next love of your life?
That's a really good question. And I don't know if there's one answer, but I do remember going on a date with somebody who did not have kids, who had never been married. And we were going to meet for a movie. And I had to send him a text and say, hey, I'm going to be about 15 minutes late because I have to deal with something with my daughter, and dealt with it, showed up. And then he was really cool. Like, he sort of didn't talk to me for about a week. And I remember reaching out to him and saying, what's going on? And he said, I'm not sure I want the drama of dating someone with kids. Huge red flag.
Yeah. And that's the truth, isn't it? Is that, not everyone's willing to be in the puzzle of everything as well. Yeah.
And I didn't hold that against him. That was just, again, a reminder is, how can I expect somebody without children to ever understand the crazy things that parents might be willing to do for their kids, right? Like, it's, you just do it. The phone rings at 2 a.m, and if your kid needs you as a parent, you jump out of bed.
Yeah, they're like your first priority.
Yeah.
So talk us through the rest as you were going through this, and journaling and making the new discoveries for yourself. So 50 was your number. Did you hit the goal?
I did. So I told you about the first date, the middle of December. 1 year later, I had the opportunity to spend a week in Maui with a girlfriend. And we were in Maui, and it was the day I was coming home. I was getting ready to go to the airport, and she said to me, oh my goodness, it's the 1 year anniversary of your first date. She's like, and you did it. You've been on 50, and I think it was about 53 dates I had been on. And she said, like, now what? Like, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. I guess I'm going to have to date 100. And she said, no, like, you need to make a list. Like, you've been through this journey and you know who you are now, and you know what you're looking for. She's like, write a list, like, write down the things you're looking for in your next person. And so I remember this, I'm standing overlooking the water in Maui, and I'm, I got my hand on my chest, and I'm like, yeah, like, I think I'm ready. Like, I feel like I've grown a lot in the last year, and I feel like I've done the work. And so I did. I made a list of what I was looking for. And whether I get on the plane and I'm working on my list a little bit more, and I come home, and the next person who asks me out for coffee, date number 54, spoiler alert, is the man I'm married to.
Wow, that's amazing. And like, congratulations that you went on this journey and managed to really get to the next marriage phase, because some people, they don't consider a second marriage as well. It might be one of those things. But the knowing who you are. So how important is that in terms of finding love?
It's the only thing that's important. That same friend, I think halfway through the journey, she's out for dinner with me, and she's just like, I could not do what you are doing. Like, how are you even having the time or the energy to go through this? And I had this kind of realization, and I said, I don't think it's about the guys. Truthfully, I think it's about learning how to date myself, because I told you that I showed up to the first date crying. I was a mess. The person I showed up on date number 1, 2, 3 was not the same person that was showing up on date number 36 and 37.
Hugely. Yeah. It's the whole, like, when they say that it's not about the end result some of the times, but it's about the person that you become. And that's what I'm really hearing from this, these dates that you've been on. What happens when it starts to get hard? Like, were there any times in between where you're just like, oh, screw this, like I don't want to do this anymore, like it's like I've got to get to that 50. But sometimes when we're focused on the number as well, it's you're not really present in the moment, or maybe you're not going into things with the right energy, because you are just like, let's just get this over and done with, let's just do another number. Did you ever get to that phase in between somewhere where you were like, just want to like stop this, or like I don't want to do another one? Like, yeah, because it can be pretty brutal.
Yeah. And you said, screw this. That was not the words that came to my mind, but absolutely, especially when you're feeling kind of deflated after a few of those dates, right? Like you come home and you're just like, really? Like I put on lipstick for that? But the goal was, the goal was always the goal. And I'm pretty tenacious and I'm pretty stubborn. And I just believed. Now, some people don't like this phrase, but I still believed in it's a numbers game. You can't go out to a room full of single guys. And if there's 50 single guys standing in that same room, you're not going to like 50 of them. You'll be lucky if you'd want to have lunch with one or two of them.
Yeah. When you say tenacious, I mean, like considering that you married the 54, so you still had the energy to keep going after the 50. You were still like, was there a new goalpost, or like were you just like, oh, like if someone came along I would go on another date, or like what was your mindset after 50?
I think my mindset after 50, I mean, goal achieved. I didn't have a new goal. There was date number 53. We had been on 3 really nice dates. And then I went to Hawaii, but we weren't exclusive. So, there could have actually been a whole different fork in the road had I not heard from date 54. But I do think that it's just sort of, I don't know. I just think the universe worked as it was supposed to. So I was just now way more relaxed, and, however long it took to find the right one, I was in it.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm really curious about when you made that list for yourself. How come you didn't make the list before you went on the dates? Like, did it ever occur to you about that part?
It should have, but maybe it didn't, because maybe in my heart I knew that I wasn't ready to make the list until I had given myself some time to heal.
Yeah. And so that's really interesting in terms of the healing, because you actually put yourself out there while you were healing. Whereas like, once people get burnt, some people could retract and just be like, I'm never going out again. And the world's too scary. And, like having to do this process is too painful as well. What advice would you give people who may be experiencing or like are going through the same thing as you? Obviously, the challenge is something that worked for you. It might not work for everyone else, but what advice would you have for them to be able to build trust again after a breakdown?
I think this advice is suitable for after a breakup, but also after going through a lengthy pandemic. I mean, we have all had some lessons in isolation and being lonely. And I feel like you sometimes have to push through the fear for the end result. Life is really short, and we know that now better than ever. So I do think that you shouldn't rush anything, but I do think one step in front of the other, slow, tiny steps, I think are really important.
And give people a picture of like when you said that you made the list and you knew yourself more through this process, what were some of the things that you had really like that was profound for you to even discover about yourself at a deeper level?
Profound about me. I guess I now know more than ever that I can trust myself. And I now know that if something doesn't feel right, it isn't right.
Yeah.
I think my I think my self-esteem is higher. I know that I'm not for everybody, and that doesn't bother me like it used to. I feel like, so my self-esteem is higher. I feel like I'm more resilient. I'm pretty proud of myself that I was able to stick it through that journey, because the end result was fantastic. The reward was amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Trust is something that is, can be quite intangible.
Mhm.
When you say trust, how do you know that you trust yourself more? Like, how do you measure that? Because, like, from
Wow. Yes.
heartbroken to knowing that you trust yourself more and that you're ready. Yeah. What's your definition of, like, or feelings towards, how do you know that for sure?
I think it's I think it's truthfully for me, it's in my gut. I feel like if I thought something before, and you receive information, and your head is nodding, yes, okay, I'm hearing that. But my stomach, my gut was like, I can't really describe the feeling, but it's a feeling, it's an innate feeling that I would have, where it just wasn't sitting right. And now I am way better at paying attention to that, whatever that feeling is. I don't have it. Now it's just like what I hear, information I receive, if it feels right, it feels good. But if I get that, even when I meet someone for the first time, and we all do this, you meet someone for the first time and you just like kind of have that little flinch, or that little like, that's trust.
Yeah.
That's your body, your intuition saying, warning.
Can we go to number 54? I don't want to call him number 54. Does he have a name, or do you want to just leave it at number?
His name is Jeff.
Jeff. Okay. When you met Jeff, what were the sensations or the feelings that you had that you allowed you to follow the trust or the intuition?
So when we met, it was the day after Christmas, and in Canada, Boxing Day, we were going to meet for coffee. And so we picked this spot. I arrived a few minutes early and the coffee shop is closed. And so I'm in pure panic mode. What are we going to do? The coffee shop's closed. I'm going to look silly. This is not great. So anyways, he comes in, and I remember was in this indoor mall, and I turn around and I see him. And again, it's going to sound so silly, but I feel like there was just this immediate, oh, there he is. There's what I've been waiting for.
Which you didn't have with the others, the 53 before.
No.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So that was the inner talk at that stage.
That was the inner talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the inner talk. And again, I'm used to, being in control and fixing situations and stuff. And I'm trying to steer him into a convenience store to have this coffee. And again, this is how I remember it. It might not be exactly like this, but I remember him just sort of stopping me and saying, like, no, we're not having grocery store, convenience store coffee. He's like, I know you don't know me, but again, trust. Why don't you just come into my truck and let's go get a Starbucks or a nice coffee? I know where there's a Starbucks open. And I just remember being like, yeah, again, somebody that will maybe take care of me. And, not that, again, that wasn't on my list. I didn't need a hero, but I just really felt like that was the person I was waiting for, someone to solve problems with me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And love that you put it in that way, someone to solve problems with you. It's like a very team orientated, relationship. um, when you got together, so after this initial first date, then after that, yeah, give us some highlights. I mean, um, did yeah, how did it lead to marriage?
Well, we went for coffee, and after his second cup of coffee, we were comparing dating notes, and because he had been single from his wife for about 6 months, and I said, you're date number 54, thinking that I was going to completely shock him. And he smiled and said, or it could be the last.
Mm. Oh, that's so sweet. That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, lots of dates, and, yeah. Well, I think what happened really is on, I think, our third date, I was still living in my parents' basement. So that's, hey, want to meet my parents? I live with them in my mid 40s, but I had just bought a condo and I was going to move into that condo, but I couldn't move in for about 5 months. And I said to him, hey, I need someone to rent my condo for 5 months. Are you interested? Because he was still figuring out his house with his ex-wife. And so he moved into that condo, not with me, obviously. And so he's like, yeah, but what if we break up? And I'm like, well, I'll be a really nice landlady for you. So the whole thing just worked out. He had been living there for 2 weeks, and a condo 10 houses down became available. So he bought that one. So we had these nice little, 150 steps to each other's house, dating for the first year and a half. So, we took it slowly, but we were also serious and committed from the first date.
Yeah, that's a beautiful journey. And in terms of when, like, how long until you actually got remarried?
We were together for 4 years before we got married. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a solid amount of time to really get to know each other, especially if you're going like 150 meters in between as well.
Yeah.
That's pretty convenient. Yeah, wonderful. And so if I want to rewind this incredible, inspiring journey that you've been on and really just like wrap it up in terms of the book. When did you decide to write this book, and, what was that process for you?
Every time I told somebody what I was doing, they said, oh my gosh, like, you should write a book. And that probably planted a seed. So once we'd been dating for a couple of years, I was looking at the journal and I was starting to sort of formulate some, very basic story. And I just kept working on it until I was ready to show it to a few people. And I have to say that was the most cathartic part of the whole healing journey, because by writing that story down, and again, starting from the worst chapter of my life and how that progressed and how I could see how I had grown, was the healing process.
Yeah. And that's pretty amazing, because now you've got something that, you have a legacy for the rest of your life that you can always look back on. Do you ever reopen it and just sort of have a like reminisce about the certain stories that you've written within it?
Kind of. I this will sound really funny. Every once in a while, somebody will like remind me of a line that I wrote or a words of wisdom, and I think, oh yeah, that's really good, isn't it? Because when you're in it, you're just sort of writing it, whatever. But then, yeah, when I've stepped away from it, I'm like, wow, like, yeah, that's what I was thinking at the time. And I sound pretty smart.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. Yeah. How has life changed since writing the book and getting remarried and everything nowadays?
I think it's changed in the sense that, life is calm. That was not a calm period of my life. This is the life that you sort of strive for, where there's no drama, it's just everyday living. And if I can share my story with people like you and just spread hope and inspiration, I mean, that's the goal. So that's the legacy I want to leave.
Yeah, which then leads nicely into my final couple of questions for you. And that is that, come now, with all the knowledge and wisdom and words of wisdom that you know, what does fulfillment mean to you?
I think fulfillment to me means I sleep well at night. I don't have that angst, that anxiety. And also I can look at my daughters and I can see that they're proud of me. And so that is the ultimate, that my husband and my daughters and my parents know that I turned out okay. And I got through the worst days of my life and I came through it okay.
So courageous. And lastly, imagine that this calm continues on for, the remainder of your life, and that you've achieved everything that you've wanted, and your daughters and your husband, everything is going, the way it should be or is. If your last day on earth came, what would be the message that you would want to send to the world or leave us with?
Pauline, you ask some good questions, don't you? I think it's going to sound trite because you've heard this probably on a postcard, but nobody can love you until you love yourself. So
True.
figure out how to love yourself.
Yeah, beautiful words. Thank you so much, Cindy, for all your insights and wisdom on your journey today. It's been such a pleasure and so inspiring.
Thank you. It was amazing. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.